further north up into Scotland, it's like a term of endearment.
Yeah, no.
So it's funny, but it's really the worst word.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Okay. All right. Hey everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd. Hope you're doing well. Here with an exclusive interview with singer-songwriter Richard Dawson. How are you doing, dude?
Fine. How are you?
Good. I'm pretty excited to have this conversation, especially since your 2020 record that you dropped last year was one of my favorites of that year. I've loved Peasant as well, and digging into your back catalog too. To kick things off, I hope you don't mind speaking about 2020, given I guess just that this year has sort of been frozen in time in a way. So I feel like, in a way, that record is still very relevant.
I hope so. I mean, I hope I can speak about it in a way that might be interesting, because I find it quite, like, more and more as I get a bit older, I find that I want to say less and less. So I realize that might not make for a very good interview, but I'll try and find a middle way.
Well, I guess to start, considering in a way how predictive the record was in some ways, do you feel like you were as on the mark as you could have been in terms of 2020 being a total and utter shit fest? I feel almost like, when I go back and listen to the record, while it is quite dystopian, and I think there are some things about it that are eerily accurate that we'll get into the interview in a bit, but I feel almost like that's the future I would have preferred if I had a choice between that one and the one we're in the middle of right now.
Yeah, I guess it would have been a more accurate record if it had sort of just stopped midway through track 3 and then just been an hour of fart noises, something like this, or just really howls of torture, something like that. But I don't know. I think I felt like at the time, we had a lot of shows lined up, and then the picture changed so drastically, and it did sort of feel, not that it matters in the great scheme of things, but it felt like that record is really. This pandemic has really spoiled this record. Is how it felt, and but now I've got some distance on it. I sort of think it's still relevant. People are still struggling with the same things. I just think those things are the problems people already had have become a hell of a lot more acute now, but they're not new problems.
Yeah, I think if the record, still retains accuracy in any way, it's not necessarily in all of the specifics that are talked about on the album. It's in the core societal issues that it's approaching, and the pandemic has exacerbated all of those and sort of made all of those really apparent. I think if there's any song on the record that probably maintains the most specific accuracy, it's probably Fulfillment Center. Considering how much during all of this pandemic we become even more dependent on sites and platforms like Amazon to sort of bring us the things that we need, and sort of the dystopian capitalist sort of hellscape that sites and outlets like that are creating.
Yeah. And I guess the key there is that those big companies are not necessarily the problem. It's not my preference, but the issue is how they treat people, and also the kind of the effects they have. And so it's not necessarily that we need to completely get rid of them, we just need them to work better for everyone. So I hope that the record isn't like a polemic or anything like that. I think I wanted to avoid it being political. You can get pulled into speaking about things using political language when, we all do it, but very few of us are politicians. I imagine that must be a horrible thing to be, but, you have to speak in your own language. And so hopefully it's a record about music first, and then politics are somewhere found in there. But
Speaking about things being music first, personally, as somebody who's been a part of the music scene for a long time, a professional musician at this point for a while, thinking back to some of the base concepts of a song like Fulfillment Center, do you personally see parallels there between how, let's say, for example, musicians across the board, especially independent musicians, are being treated these days by big streaming platforms or the music industry at large? Do you feel like there's kind of like a similar sort of lack of appreciation and exploitation kind of going on there, especially during the age of the pandemic, where for a lot of people, the key monetary resource, touring and performing, is kind of being ripped away, and musicians are kind of being left with left to fend for themselves, just with streaming and whatever else they can do to get by.
Yeah, I think you could say that. I think those patterns probably exist in lots of different fields, and they're nothing new, but we are particularly focused on the Spotify issue at the minute because it's it's an example that affects us, but that model is nothing new, of there being an incredible amount of profit at the top, which is driven and built upon the work of tens of thousands of millions of workers who don't get rewarded in a fair way as compared to what those few people do at the top. That's not just in the music, though. This is how people set up their societies again and again and again and again. So it's it's not a new problem. It's a very old problem.
Yeah, and I mean, if anybody sort of has that perspective, at least in the creative field, I feel like it's certainly you, given like how a lot of those themes of struggle and strife come up on Peasant as well, when a lot of those themes and a lot of those stories seem almost like archaic. And then with 2020, it's like you're kind of playing out a lot of those same issues and themes, but in more of a modern context. Do you feel like over that course of time, there's been a significant amount of progression? Do you feel like we're just kind of suffering from, the same issues and problems over and over and over, but now we have like computers in our hands, and now we're able to talk to each other over Zoom, but like,
yeah.
do you see progress in a way?
Who knows? I do. I think I'm pretty optimistic, but also the opposite of optimistic, pessimistic. I had to think what that was for a second, but I always feel like quite contradictory about these things, and it's not like confusion. It's just that both are true simultaneously, and I think we probably have come on a long way, but there's some things don't change much, and I don't know. How can we know as well, especially when we're writing about moments that happened a long time ago? For me, my feeling is that all moments happen at all times. Our perception of time is not the full picture, So maybe how can I say, what happens 500 years ago has an effect on now, but what happens now maybe has an effect on 500 years ago. Or maybe that's just like crazy thinking. I don't know. I guess I'm trying to say I don't think things change fast. Surface things change very fast, but real change takes lots and lots of generations, and the same mistakes get made again and again and again. And I think that's a crucial part of human nature. We're very fallible, and we learn. We do by learning, and we do the things our parents taught us. And this is how ideas travel through how your energy, what you do with your life will travel for thousands and tens of thousands of years, and maybe more. or maybe not. Maybe it'll all be extinguished quite soon. But you know,
I suppose that's a possibility too.
Yes.
I guess considering that thought, societally and globally, I don't know. I mean, I think if most people are, I think most people, if you're really paying attention to the news, and maybe this isn't really kind of a unique perspective. Maybe every generation feels this way to an extent. It feels almost like we're on the threshold or the precipice of something. And again, given what you've kind of just said about change and things, you know, sort of really changing slowly over time, do you feel like from what your own, you know, observations are that is in fact the case, or do you feel like that's more of like an illusion? That sort of like we're on the verge of sort of like upending these inequities in society, or, you know, things like getting worse than they've ever been?
Well, I don't think that we're on the verge of solving much, but sorry, I got a little distracted there. I thought Sally was coming down the stairs. It's okay. I sort of lost my train of thought, Anthony. I'm sorry about that. Could you ask me again?
Oh, yeah.
Apologies to your viewers. My brain is it's not a good brain.
No, it's fine. I just want to know, you know, given the popular sentiment that we're on the verge of some kind of change, whether it be sort of like a positive one or a negative one, do you feel like, given your feelings on a change occurring slowly and just kind of the perspective of time of, you know, your work so far, is that feeling sort of real or more of an illusion?
I think that we each of us makes layers and layers and layers of illusions that we use to function. And if we were to actually comprehend the craziness of our situation, I think that this would be there wouldn't be much cause for hope. But the glorious thing about people is their limitless supply of hope, even when there is no sort of seemingly good reason for that. And it's what's managed to project us into the future, and it's what sort of encourages us to aspire and to achieve things. Like I like this idea of the only fight worth fighting is the impossible one. You know, not that you should fight. I'm not into that, but so I don't know. I need longer to think about that question. It's a good question, but it deserves a better answer, I think, than the one I've just given you.
All right. Moving on from there a little bit, you did also come out with a project this year that you dropped on Bandcamp. What was that? The Republic of...
Oh, Republic of Geordieland?
Yeah. I know that you described the record on that site as being like a dog's dinner. Though personally, I did find some really interesting things on the album, being as raw as it is, though. You know, dive into that a little bit. How would you say, you know, this pandemic situation has kind of affected your, you know, creative process?
You know, at first I was really in my element. Apart from being, I kind of went quite early in the UK, a lot earlier than a lot of people here. I was just fixed to the news for like the month before lockdown, and I got, you know, really crazy with it, and I was very worried.
I was kind of following that too. Did you get freaked out at the same time that like all the Italian grocery stores had a run on them? And
yeah, exactly. And even a little before, like I was traveling. I had some. I had a gig and some work in Finland and Scandinavia, so I was traveling around whilst it was first sort of emerging. And so that was like, I don't know, I got my really scared, anxious part out of the way quite quick. So when lockdown actually happened, it was kind of, if it doesn't feel like a taboo anymore, but it felt at the time like a taboo. That I thought, this is brilliant. It really suited me, as I'm fairly antisocial, with very strong bursts of sociability every now and again, too strong. And so we were just in the house, quiet skies, and it was just brilliant opportunity for focus. And so I was upset about losing so many gigs, because I was really going to go for it this year, because I thought the material's right to do a lot of rock shows, and I just thought, let's get out there in a way that I wouldn't usually like to do. So suddenly we got all this time, but it was great because I had this project to finish with Circle. I've been working on an album with, so I finished that much sooner than I thought, and then I was making music with Sally. We started a new band called Bull Bills in the house, and we were doing like an album a day, and I was just reading, and I was like, this is it. This is amazing. Apart from the worry of like, oh my God, are we ever going to be able to play shows again? And, how am I going to make a living? That kind of thing. But if you can just stave off all of those worries, then the actual day-to-day was very, very nice. And then end of May, June, big crash, which I think maybe a lot of people experience as well. So it's, the focus side has been really great. But then what I'm finding is it's really like choppy seas. You'll be in calm waters, and then all of a sudden squall, and you're just getting tossed around for a week or so, And so I think it got a lot more challenging sort of here when the messaging got very confused. How's it been for you this year? What kind of ride have you had?
Honestly, a similar trajectory. It's there's kind of a initial spot where it seems like, I don't know, it's almost like a sleepover in a way. It's like, hey, we're going to be like camping inside for all this time, and sort of, and not to sort of make it out to be something that seems like fun, because none of this has really been fun. But then at the point where you start seeing that while I know that these closures are essential, ultimately because of political disarray, lack of a federal response. I mean, I can only speak the most to how ineffective my country's been at combating it, and a whole host of other things, like all these lockdowns, closures, all this isolation, all this quarantine, ultimately didn't really do much. Not to say that it's not effective. Obviously, like, the curve had been flattened at the time that we were doing it, and that it was like kind of the most, I guess, rigid in terms of like what was being instilled. But then there's the fact that the government just handed people one $1,200 check, basically no plans for helping or saving or keeping afloat local businesses. Still at this point, virtually no plan to keep people in their apartments, prevent people from losing their insurance, so on and so forth. So, whatever sort of minor appeals the whole thing might have had originally, completely dissipated at this point. And, as I was kind of referring to earlier, like a lot of these terrible inequities that you're kind of talking about on 2020, really just torn and ripped open and, sort of laid bare by the fact that there's just little to no infrastructure or anything to deal with these problems, even when they're made worse by like, a once in 100-year pandemic that, is either at this point deadly or having some severe long-term effects for a lot of people, which if we gave more credence and money to doctors and medical institutions, we would probably have a better understanding at this point as to like what exactly those are. But because there's so little of an emphasis of that, there's so little general understanding, and also because of how new, the virus is as well. I mean, we're just getting the vaccine out there right now, but sadly, like, because it's so new, like, we're not even entirely sure, like, what is the I guess rate of long-term inoculation here. Like, how often are you going to need to get the vaccine if you want to prevent from catching the coronavirus? Is it a one and done, and all of a sudden, it's going to be kind of like a measles type situation, or will it be in like 6 more months, like we're all of a sudden vulnerable to it again? And there's going to be another round of that at some point. So I don't know. There's just a lot of confusion, a lot of questions, a lot of struggle, and I don't know. I'm glad that we sort of like stepped back from the edge of fascism as a result of all of this. But it seems like there's a lot of people, unfortunately, who have seen that and have sort of like, our work is done here. Everything fixed. Yeah. And when that's just so far from being the case, because there's still so many people out of work. There's still so many people who have lost insurance. There's still so many people who are confused as a result of all of the disinformation around all of this that's still being put out there. Even though a lot of the politicians and figureheads on the right have kind of given up on this narrative that the election was stolen, and we're kind of coming to the reality that Joe Biden is going to be president. It's still continually being asserted that this is a phony pandemic. The virus is real, but the pandemic is phony for some reason. And you don't need to wear a mask, and people telling you to wear a mask is oppression, and it's just completely fucking ridiculous. And I guess now we're totally off of the initial track of all of this at this point. But
this is perfect from my point of view.
Oh yeah. Like I'm like I wish I was on your side of the fence right now. I desperately do. Although I'm incredibly jealous of some of my Australian friends right now who, they seem to have kind of nipped it in the bud. And, while things over there are not completely back to normal, it looks like they're on a much better trajectory than it is over here. But, getting more into music and music aesthetics, one of the most interesting things that I find about, your recordings, especially in the case of Peasant and 2020, is there's such an interestingly anachronistic quality about them, because the type of folk music that seems to inspire you the most deeply, there's really like an archaic kind of quality to it, a centuries old quality to it, but you're kind of modernizing it in a way, or at least like applying these modern perspectives to it. And over here in America, it's a little bit harder to kind of get that sense, because like our folk music traditions aren't quite as old. So it seems like there's not as much of like I guess a stony and sort of like I guess I'll say almost like a medieval kind of quality to them. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. As far as America's folk music traditions go, you're talking like a couple hundred years tops. Yeah. But again. What is that kind of process for you like? Is that something that you're consciously kind of diving into and attempting to achieve in terms of like modernizing these much older sounds and forms and melodies in English folk music and take them to noisy, maybe in some cases psychedelic or abrasive or surreal places?
I don't think I really ever thought of it that way, and I never knew too much about. I mean, I was interested in folk music, but not especially more than any other kind of music. And it was only really from maybe after Magic Bridge album, maybe some people started like telling me, "Oh, I should check out so and so. You sound a bit like him," and so I would listen to things that way, and got to know a lot more like English folk through my pals here, Kath and Phil Tyler, who are amazing musicians. If anyone's watching, you can go on and find them on Bandcamp. Kath and Phil Tyler, absolutely amazing musicians. They introduced me to a lot of things. My friend Sarah as well, who's also a singer. So I sort of came to learn more about British folk from maybe like 5-6 years ago, when I had this thought to do a cappella record. I didn't really think of it as being a folk record at the time, but I thought I'd better listen to some other just singing records. I'd already heard one, which was a Mike Waterson album. It's just called Mike Waterson, and it's got him rounding up some sheep on the front. It's a really beautiful cover, and his voice is incredible. He sounds like a sheep, the most beautiful sheep. So I found that very inspiring, but I'd never really thought of it as folk music. I think I would always approach the albums, think of them more like a painting or a book or something like that, so that they could have, even though I think most of the albums essentially are pretty much the same at their core, the kind of styles are different maybe, and I like this. I like to read writers who, maybe write in different settings, but how do you maintain the spirit through these different methods? Keep yourself on your toes, that kind of thing. So, I mean, it's kind of amazing I've managed to make one album I can barely string a sentence together. So, thanks to people for keeping up with this.
Going back to the project that you had released this year, the Republic of Geordieland, even though you weren't able to maybe achieve some of the musical ambitions that you had planned out for a record of this title, you sort of have your feelings about how it ended up turning out. Were there some ideas and sounds that you feel like you were able to achieve on the project that you look back on positively in terms of some of the instrumental passages, or the a cappella vocal sections or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pleased with that record, and the way to describe it as a dog's dinner is just a really useful way to just maybe angle people's perspectives a little bit. I wouldn't. I had this record in my mind for a long time to do, and maybe it would be like quite a straight folk album, because that's exactly the last thing I would ever want to do. So let's do that. But what it turned out to be was something quite strange, and I think the situation with the pandemic allowed it to happen. I think it probably wouldn't. I just wouldn't have done it otherwise. But the context for it was just right for this kind of hodgepodge. But actually, I think it's quite satisfying as an album. But it wouldn't have made sense to release it just in normal times and as part of it sort of sits outside of the other work, if you know what I mean. But having this opportunity to position it in that way was very good. So it was the right time to do it. I sort of imagined it would come 10 or 15 years down the line. So that's kind of exciting. That I'm just clinging on to the positive things, like when there's so much crappy stuff has happened this year. It's like, well, there's this really positive stream, and these other doors have opened up, just personally. So yeah, I like this album. It kind of hangs together, and I like the it has a unifying spirit to it. I don't think it could have happened outside of something like this. So,
would you say outside of the context of all of this madness, were you to be able to, or when you create under, I guess, more normal circumstances, or I guess you perceive yourself creating a record that you would release under more normal circumstances, do you see yourself creatively as more of a perfectionist? Are the details of a project or the way it comes together sort of something that keeps you awake at night?
Yeah, I don't think I would use the word perfectionist, but I'm going to push as far as it needs to go. For instance, 2020 was a very hard record for me to make. Just a lot of it because some of the sounds are used and the way it sounds is not how I would be, like I'm having to change my style a little bit, and, it's much more of a tighter kind of record. But whatever the record needs, once you let it in, you have to honor that. If you've asked for it and it's made itself known and arrived, then it's your job to start to chisel it down. You have to go all the way, and otherwise that's a betrayal. So, but perfect isn't the goal. Just how it is. I feel like these records already exist, like anything, not just chatting with other like writers and painters and stuff. When you sit down before you've done anything, you can feel this thing is alive, and then it's not yours. You just have to. You're its servant. You have to polish. Just keep polishing and just keep going until it becomes what it always was and is. This is how it feels. I know this might just be a poetic way or not so poetic way of describing a mental condition or an illusion, but more and more this is how it really feels. That the things when things are decent, and the decent work is that they already exist, and they're their own thing. That's really how it feels, and more I'm convinced that's how it is, and it's not just some idea.
We're going to be taking a few user questions from the tab down below in the chat as well. Cool Face Emoji would like to know a bit of a formative question. How did you originally end up picking up the guitar? What drove you that in that direction originally?
Well, my dad had a guitar which I was only allowed to sort of touch now and again, just very from afar, for a while, and then maybe I got to like 10 or 11 and I could play it then. And then I would make I made a cardboard guitar with a piece of wood, and I would dance around to Iron Maiden and stuff like that. But I decided I wanted to play the drums, and I asked for a drum kit for birthday or Christmas. I can't remember which it was. And my dad wouldn't get me a drum kit because it was too loud, so he got a guitar instead. So and then just got it. But it wasn't really so much about the guitar. It was like getting the guitar home. It was immediately sitting down and let's write a song. So I just had no idea how to do it, but it was just as soon as I got the guitar, it was just like an impulse. Just like had to write a song. Had, no idea then, and no idea now. Still no idea. Just it's amazing how you sort of, because when you get some nice reviews, you get big head, or a little bit, you try and fight it, but you can't help but get a bit the ego inflated. But it's every time you sit down to write something new, you realize that I don't know what I'm doing. It's a good feeling.
Yeah, I mean, as you're writing, you do your best to try to shut all of that out, and I guess more create in a vacuum, I suppose.
Yeah, I think I found it really challenging after I can't remember which album it was. I think it was Nothing Important, maybe, and it got some I can't remember which one it was, but I remember sitting down to start an album. I think it was Peasant, and I tried to write, and I realized my head was still, because I'd been really engaging with social media and all of that stuff and reviews. My head was in this world of other people's perception, and I just couldn't write. I couldn't write anything because I realized every line, every word, I was thinking it from what will so and so think? How will this be perceived by this group of people? What a nightmare! So unhealthy, and it was my mind was really sick. As an artist, I was really sick. So I think it took a month and a half of no computer, nothing like that, and then I could get down to writing. And so now I'm much more careful about that kind of thing, because I am prone to egotism, like many of us.
Yeah, I think that's something that's honestly super underrated in art spaces in the modern age, just being able to unplug and sort of distance yourself from all of that. I personally, I think it's kind of essential, unless your goal is ultimately to do nothing but creatively just work into this commercial feedback loop where you're just kind of trying to, fulfill whatever the newest audience need is at any given moment, which I mean, that's an approach as well. That's certainly an approach that you could go about. And it's one that the way the system is set up currently, I feel like it almost just encourages that and simply that. And you almost have to remind yourself that there's another way of going about things if you want to do anything else.
Yeah. I really admire that way as well, though, when you see such talented producers and when they can just wow, hit after hit, or some amazing stuff, some amazing pop music, but that's not going to fly for me. So,
as an artist and as a creative, do you, I don't know, have any reflections on, speaking of pop music and pop artists, for example, the recent shift creatively, Taylor Swift has undergone, embracing these indie folk aesthetics and, getting a Dessner from the National in the mix and, getting Bon Iver on the records. I know that recently Zola Jesus had a bit of an astute observation about the whole thing, just about sort of the inequities that we were talking about earlier, indie general, and true indie folk musicians kind of struggling. Meanwhile, one of the biggest artists in music ever is just sort of raking it in, with these sounds and with these aesthetics that, another community of musicians and artists sort of honed.
Yeah. Yeah. But again, it's it's not a new problem, is it? It's, just co-opting what, I mean, you hear it in pop music over the years. I remember starting to hear, when there was what they call glitch hop, I guess, back in the late 1990s, and then that suddenly started to creep into songs on the radio, and it was kind of exciting to hear these fabulous sounds used in pop production, but also wow, it's amazing that you could just literally just pick that and plop it in this situation. On the other hand, though, it's I feel like there is a positive side to it where people are hearing more wild music these days, and when you think about what constitutes pop music, there's some pretty nuts stuff is getting into people's ears. So I don't know. I mean, if Taylor Swift, I'm not fishing here, but if Taylor Swift reached out to me.
Hey, use this platform to fish all you like. Go for it.
If Taylor Swift, or it would be so amazing if you're so even if you're Bon Iver, I know you think of like Bon Iver, oh my God, this is a big famous guy, but in his mind, he's just a bloke. So if Taylor Swift gets in touch and be like, yeah, I'm going to be on a record, that's amazing. I'm not saying I would, but like,
hey, my fingers are crossed for you. My fingers are crossed.
Oh, good, thank you.
All right. This next question comes from Sleepy. That they're talking about your guitar tuning. And I'm sure you've probably done this on occasion. I don't know if this is always the case, but they're asserting that you tune your guitar in C, G, C, E, G, C. Is that an open tuning? Or have you tuned your guitar in that tune? And do you work with other tunings as well?
Yeah, that sounds right. I'm not very good with the notes. I don't, but I think that sounds about right. It's an open C major chord when you strum it, and then occasionally I turn whichever one it is down to make a minor, so you can just go down one step on the fourth one away from you. It's very technical. And I generally just play in those two at the minute. Occasionally I might drop to the C a bit further down. But yeah, I arrived at that like because I had a bunch of this when I was like maybe 23 or 24. I had maybe more shows lined up than I ever had just around the local area. And I got into like drunk wrestling with a pal outside of a pub, and I broke my little finger. So like it was going off like in this direction. So I had to get it pinned with a Suzuki frame, which was named after the doctor who invented it, through each knuckle. And so I had this great big metal frame coming out. And the only way I could play any songs was to put it in this open tune and just play with like two fingers. So I relearned a couple of songs that way and then wrote like 3 or 4 new songs for these shows. But then it was like, oh, well, I've got 4. These songs are good. So kept writing, and then I never went back. So the drunk wrestling, I thought I'd finished. I thought I was done because this finger was fucked. But turns out it was like, had a real, that turned out quite well in the end.
And do you still do any drunk wrestling to this day? Is that something that you're just totally off the drunk wrestling?
Very much more safety conscious than I was back in those days. I mean, I was a real prick. Can I say prick?
There's a risk run, but I mean, maybe some more good could come of it in the end. I don't know. Yeah, no. When I look back, it's like, I think quite common, especially for young people in Newcastle and other cities. But when I look, all of the, I don't really. I like to drink. Don't get me wrong. I love a pint of Guinness, but it's like the amounts that I was drinking in my 20s are really stupid. And so no, I don't put myself in harm's way like that. Got it.
Anymore.
Not Oscar would like to know if you're at all a fan of or inspired by the work of one Joanna Newsom.
Not particularly, but she's great. I listen to her albums when I worked in the record shop, and she's amazing. I never got into them like some of my pals did, but I think I will. Maybe this is a good reason to revisit them. I remember thinking, is it yes or is? I never knew how to pronounce that, but I remember thinking that was so ambitious and great. And she seems like a good egg.
Next question comes from a Mayo defender saying, noticing in live clips of your stuff, you tend to play out your songs a lot more aggressively, maybe. Would you say that that's a fair characterization?
Yeah, and it's frustrating. I think I reached a point like maybe a couple of years ago. I just felt like I was shouting all the time, and I was burning my voice out as well. But I started feeling like, man, this isn't like energy is one thing, but maybe you can rely on that too much. So I've been trying to pull back a little bit and I think it's getting more interesting. But yeah, I think that's really blasting it. Sometimes it's the right thing, but I think I was kind of going there, maybe looking back, like, because if you pull back, then there's no hiding, but you can blast through, and it's, exciting in the moment. But I don't know. I think sometimes it could be a bit much.
Well, what would you say kind of drove that energy or the desire to do that originally?
Well, I was coming from being really into metal when I was growing up, and and then like techno and a lot of African music as well, and just like really like banging stuff, and also like I really loved the loud singers. I mean, Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan is the singer. I mean, amazing, and I just that kind of raw power. I never saw Nusrat, but I've seen a lot of Qawwali live, and it's just that a human voice can really cut a hole in a room, cut a doorway open, and I think I kind of wanted to do that for people, but I was getting to a point where it was unsustainable, and I was burning my voice out every night and having to push harder and harder and harder, and in the end I just felt like I was shouting at people. Actually, I've done enough shouting now. It's time to mumble a bit more.
The last thing I'll ask to sort of give people something to look toward, what would you say you're working on right now? I know that you kind of over the course of this conversation, you've talked about a lot of this, a lot of stuff you've recorded and kind of, a lot of writing that you've done. But, what would you say that you've been kind of tinkering with that you're actually like, kind of focusing on getting released next at some point? Are you kind of thinking about releasing something sooner rather than later, or has this pandemic kind of put your, big ticket sort of release schedule on hold until sort of further notice right now?
Well, my next solo album, I've been planning to start writing the lyrics, but it just hasn't been right. It's not quite there, so I think I'll start in January. I've got most of the music ready, or the guitar parts and the vocals, so I'll start writing that in January. Excuse me. And I've just about finished. We're just in the last mixes of. I've been working on a record with Circle, who are one of my favorite ever bands. Yeah, from Finland. Totally incredible bands. Go check them out. There's loads of stuff on Bandcamp again. If you go on to Electro Bandcamp.
Would that be a Bandcamp release, or like something through Domino?
No, this is going to be. I think we're not quite sure yet how we'll release it, but we're so excited about it. Like it's going to be we want to really put it out there, and lyrically, I think I'm pretty happy with it. Okay. I don't want to say too much because it's not out there yet, but we're just really, working with Circle's been like dream come true. So, and we've got to be friends through doing it as well. So they're really like family now. So I can't wait to get this record out. So I hope it'll be like midway through next year. It's pretty much done. And then my solo record, I don't know when that'll be, but I guess towards the end of next year. Who knows? And then I'm working on working on this thing. Big, don't know if you can see, big painting.
That's actually really cool.
Yeah, it's come out all right. It's I'm going to chop it up into about 30 pieces and give it to friends and family, and so it's maybe one of the best paintings I've managed to do, because I can't paint, but I'm using Posca pens. But I'm almost loath to chop it up now. It's a good idea, so I'll stick with it. Yeah, and that's about it. And
Okay.
Henna Glad, this other band, if it's okay to mention, we just filmed a show which would be broadcast this coming weekend.
Oh, okay.
That's kind of the last thing of the year. So that's on. There's a kids gig on Saturday, and then a full adult set on the Sunday night. So if anyone's interested in this, then that's going to be this weekend. And I think the kids show is like pay what you feel, and then the adult shows maybe like £10 or something. But
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we've linked your social media and stuff down below. Just update us on all of that over there. And thanks for just catching up with us and having this convo, dude.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thanks for helping spread the word and keep up the good work. I don't know how you do it, to be honest.
I don't know how you do it either, man. Your music mystifies me as well, and I'm just looking forward to just hearing whatever you're doing next. And again, I just appreciate you taking the time.
Cheers, pal. Thank you.
All right. Have a good one.